Across many generations, people have often noticed strange changes in individuals shortly before they die. Some suddenly become quiet and withdrawn. Others speak as if they are preparing for a journey, and many report vivid dreams of deceased relatives. These moments have fueled the belief that humans may somehow sense the approach of their own death. But is there any truth to this idea? Can people really sense their own death approaching? Or are these stories simply symbolic ways of explaining the inevitable end of life? Grab your snacks as I am going to explore this question under perspectives of religions, medical researches, and cultural traditions around the world. As some traditions speak of divine signals and spiritual preparation, others interpret strange experiences as messages from the unseen world. Meanwhile, medical science studies the physical process of dying and attempts to understand whether the body itself reveals any clues before death occurs. Modern medicine studies the dying process mainly through the field of palliative care, where doctors, researchers, and hospice caregivers have spent decades in observing the physical and psychological changes that occur as life comes to an end. Research into the terminal phase shows that recognizable physical signs usually appear only in the final days or hours of life, rather than weeks in advance. These signs often include changes in breathing patterns, cooling or discoloration of the skin, loss of appetite, extreme fatigue, and decreasing levels of consciousness. Such symptoms are commonly documented in hospice settings and clinical studies of the dying process. For example, the iPod study, which examined patients with advanced cancer, found that certain early indicators, such as difficulty swallowing liquids, tend to appear roughly 7 days before death, while more severe late signs, including pulselessness of the radial artery, often appear about a day before death and strongly predict that death will occur within the following 3 days. These findings show that while the body does signal the approach of death, the most reliable physiological markers cluster within the final week of life, rather than exactly 40 days beforehand. Broader longitudinal research also demonstrates that the path toward death varies greatly depending on the disease and the individual. A well-known cohort study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association examined patterns of decline among older adults and found that people with cancer often remained relatively active until about 3 months before death, after which their level of disability increased rapidly. By contrast, individuals suffering from chronic conditions such as heart failure or dementia frequently experience a much slower and more gradual deterioration over several years. Because these patterns differ so widely, physicians cannot identify a universal biological timeline that predicts death for every patient. No medical research has found a biological marker that consistently appears 40 days before death in all humans. Instead, the process of dying unfolds differently depending on the illness, the body, and the circumstances of each person. Caregivers in nursing homes and hospice settings often observe subtle psychological changes in patients weeks before death. Individuals may gradually withdraw from their surroundings, losing interest in activities they once enjoyed, sleeping more, speaking less, and becoming more introspective. In a qualitative study of Swedish nursing home staff, caregivers describe this shift as patients going into a bubble, meaning they slowly detach from the social world. Some patients also report vivid dreams or visions of deceased relatives who appear to comfort or guide them. Although these experiences are common in hospice care and may relate to neurological or emotional changes, they do not follow a predictable timeline. When we step away from medicine and look at the perspectives of religion, we find that many traditions have long attempted to interpret these mysterious experiences. In Islamic belief, the moment of death is considered part of divine knowledge known only to God. The Quran repeatedly emphasizes that no soul knows when or where it will die, and that every life ends at a moment already decreed. Yet within later Islamic literature and folklore, there are symbolic descriptions that attempt to explain how the approach of death might be revealed in the unseen realm. One widely repeated story speaks about a tree located beneath the divine throne. According to this tradition, every human being has a leaf on that tree bearing their name. When the time of a person's death draws near, the leaf falls. and the angel of death, known as Azrael, reads the name written upon it. Some narrations suggest that this event may occur roughly 40 days before death, symbolizing that the decree has been issued. In certain interpretations, it is said that during this period a subtle pulsation appears within the body, representing the beginning of the final stage of life. Yet many scholars emphasize that such details do not appear directly in the Quran itself, and are instead part of later interpretations or mystical storytelling. Christianity approaches the mystery of death with a different emphasis. The Bible frequently mentions the number 40. The flood in the story of Noah lasted 40 days and nights. The Israelites wandered in the desert for 40 years, and Jesus spent 40 days fasting in the wilderness. But these references usually symbolize periods of testing or transformation rather than predictions of death. However, the scriptures do not describe a specific period during which a person receives signs that death is approaching. Instead, Christian theology emphasizes the unpredictability of death and the need for spiritual preparedness at all times. This idea appears clearly in one of the most well-known Christian prayers, where believers ask for divine intercession, now and at the hour of our death. The phrase suggests that death may come suddenly and without warning. Still, throughout Christian history, there have been stories of saints who seem to sense their approaching death. Some reported dreams of angels or visions of loved ones waiting for them in the afterlife. Whether these experiences represent spiritual insight or psychological preparation remains open to interpretation. Hindu philosophy offers yet another perspective. Within Hindu thought, death is not viewed as a final ending, but as part of a continuous cycle of birth, death, and rebirth governed by karma. Ancient texts, such as the Bhagavad Gita, describe the soul, or Atman, as eternal and indestructible, merely changing bodies as one might change clothing. Some traditional writings mention unusual experiences or bodily signs that may indicate a person's life is nearing its end, but these descriptions are vague and do not specify a precise timeline like 40 days. Instead, Hindu culture places strong emphasis on the rituals performed after death. Family members conduct ceremonies during the days following a person's passing to guide the soul safely into its next stage of existence. These practices reflect the belief that the transition from one life to another unfolds gradually, rather than at a single moment. Beyond religion and science, cultures around the world have developed their own interpretations of death and the signs that might precede it. In Chinese folklore, dreams involving deceased relatives are sometimes interpreted as messages from the spirit world. Certain animals or unusual sounds may be considered omens that death is approaching. During the Ghost Festival, families honor their ancestors and believe that spirits may briefly return to the world of the living. In various African traditions, death may be associated with ancestral spirits or supernatural forces, and unusual dreams or events may be interpreted as warnings. Some indigenous cultures in North America also associate specific animals, such as owls or ravens, with messages connected to the spiritual realm. Even ancient Egypt, one of the civilizations most famous for its elaborate beliefs about the afterlife, did not teach that people receive a 40-day warning before death. However, the number 40 did play an important role in Egyptian burial rituals. During the mummification process, the body was packed with natron salts and left to dry for roughly 40 days before the final burial preparations were completed. This period formed part of a 70-day ritual designed to preserve the body for the afterlife. Interestingly, this means the number 40 was associated with death, but only after death had already taken place. So can humans truly sense their own death approaching? Religion offers symbolic stories that suggest destiny unfolding in unseen ways. Cultural traditions describe omens, dreams, and encounters with the spirit world. Medical science observes physical and psychological changes as the body nears the end of life. Yet none of these perspectives provide clear evidence that every human receives a precise warning weeks in advance. Instead, deeper human intuition begins to shift by adopting quieter, more reflective, isolated behavior.